Grande, the Nano, and the Xenon. And Marcus can talk about distribution products.
I'm just going to touch briefly on distribution. We are importing completely built units. We have our own freight from India and Thailand. We're going to open 19 dealerships in Indonesia. As you can see how they're allocated, Jakarta is the major city, so we'll open the most there. We'll have high initial and logistical costs. Transportation is initially going to be very expensive. However, we have an Asian trade agreement, which Thailand is a part of, so we will not be forced to the 40% tariff that Indonesia imposes from the Xenon that we are importing from Thailand. However, we will have that 40% tariff on everything from India. However, there's a recent Asian-India trade agreement, but the tariff will be effective until 2014 on completely built units. But after 2014, we will not have to have that be an additional cost that we'll have to enforce. And now we're going to Eric with the advertising and other promotions.
Just to touch briefly on some of our advertising and promotional strategies. We're going to look at general media outreach, print, TV, radio, focusing on print based on research that's the highest responsiveness from consumers. We're also going to put together some incentive programs, looking at coupons, discounts, some standard means of that. Also, a multi-level marketing approach, putting together a Better Friend program where you can purchase a car, and then if you introduce another person, we'll provide cutbacks on your down payment or financing deals. And then community involvement, stuff like Tata Tea Time, Indonesian culture, tea is a really big deal. So putting together some unique aspects at our dealerships to get people involved. Tata Driving School, for example, with the teens in the area. I'm going to put together some unique stuff like that. And that's the extent so far of our brainstorming with advertising. Conclusion, we want to pursue some further research with focus groups, surveys, and also pursue a contract with DKI Market Research. They're a big market research firm in Indonesia that we've identified. They specialize in the automobile industry and would be really useful for us. In conclusion, we have a really good opportunity in Indonesia. I think it's a great market that we should definitely enter. And any questions?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we have some time for questions. Please go ahead.
What's the timeline of the entry of the luxury car?
It really all depends on the rapid success of the first phase of implementation for our brand strategy. We really need to position ourselves well in the market before we can introduce this luxury market, because the fact that we're introducing 4 vehicles versus a few different lines of luxury vehicles. So it's critical that we get a well-rounded kind of company that is focusing on the main people, because that's really what our lower-end vehicles before acquisition of Land Rover and Jaguar focused on, were the vehicles for the people, priced for the people. So that's the real image that we want to implement in Indonesia before we move in with the luxury market. So it could be anywhere from 2 to 5 years, but it could be extended based on the fact that if things progress slower or economic conditions slow down.
And also just to add on to that, I spoke briefly about the Asian-India trade agreement that is currently going on that will decrease the tariffs of imports coming in, which will be effective in 2014. So if we decide to import, hopefully a little bit, we won't have to have that be a cost for us. And additionally, in the past, the few luxury brand vehicles that have been sold in Indonesia have been mostly for show. They've been dealt with as a piece of art and not technically as used for driving. They've been showcasing in the wealthy people's homes, and as I said, haven't really been used for driving. But with the government's initiative to spend billions of dollars increasing the infrastructure and the roads, as the infrastructure continues to improve, Land Rover especially will be able to be used in their landscape that isn't paved or whatever. But Ferrari, which has been introduced, obviously can't be driving on these unpaved roads with potholes and such. So Land Rover would obviously be useful in the Indonesian market.
Yeah, it would be like a useful but higher priced luxury car, because the luxury cars that they have introduced right now are like the major brands like Ferrari and such that people can't even drive around the city. They're just putting them in their homes as display.
You just say that the price will be determined based on the market. Do you know exactly those costs? And will it be, because I know there'll be high distribution costs, how will that be offset? Because I know like not a lot of people are going to buy the luxury cars. It's more like a niche market. Do the costs really balance out with the benefits?
The cost of
Like the cost of distribute, like actually bringing in the luxury car versus how many people are actually going to buy that car.
Well, and to compare it to the U.S. market, it's not a larger market. It's not going to be a full-fledged market like our first phase of implementation, where it's going to be for the entire population. The luxury market's a lot smaller of a market, so there might be one big flagship store in Jakarta and one other in another major city, where it's not widespread. It's going to be only more of a limited kind of vehicle to appeal to that niche. And Tata did this with the Nano, where they had a pre-sale program where only a limited amount of people were able to pre-order these cars. And there's a few-year waiting list for that. So it's a slow implementation to build up a big hype, and even to grow the actual and develop that market segment from a smaller percentage to a greater percentage as we first get well established, and also grow that luxury market as it develops.
And incomes are projected to keep rising, and discretionary income is also supposed to keep rising. So we hope that, additionally, we talked about helping NGOs and such. With the luxury cars, there's a 200% tax on these, so the government is really into these luxury brands coming in and actually being sold because they make so much money off of them. So, and there has been research showed that they are selling, obviously not in such huge quantities, but when Ferrari opened a showcase that had 10 cars, within the first 2 months, 6 of those cars were sold, and each one of them with 200% tax, the government's making a huge amount of money. So obviously we're not bringing that like a new great number of cars, but the few that we bring in have shown that they can be sold rather quickly.
Luxury is more for a future option. It's definitely not an immediate prospect for us.
One more question.
My question was, Swan out, you said that Tata Motors has maybe some financial risk if they're not in the best financial situation, and the proposal is to do a wholly subsidized or wholly operated, subsidy in Indonesia, which is the most expensive option and also carries the most risk. Do you feel that Tata Motors will be able to pay for this and make a profit off that with its other commitments elsewhere, such as the Land Rover and Jaguar situations?
I mean, sorry, you want to hit Marcus?
Go ahead.
Absolutely. They did take a very large write-down for a high amount of debt for the acquisition of Land Rover and Jaguar, but they actually got it for quite a bargain for the amount they paid for it at the height of the recession. So it's all part of actually the growth of Tata. 5 years ago, no one outside of Southeast Asia knew who Tata was. Then they introduced the world's most expensive car, and then they bought 2 very well-known Western brands. So it's all part of the overall growth of Tata, and so their revenues have actually grown as well as their net income. So they are absorbing large amounts of costs from the amount of debt that was acquired, but it's actually transformed Tata in a major player in the world market. So not specifically in relation to Indonesia, which they will be able to afford a market expansion there because the discretionary funds that they have set up for that, they don't have to have a stock issue, they don't have to have a bond measure every time that they want to expand to a new market, because they're very good at expanding in these different markets, specifically in a region where they have a very strong presence. So because they're in that region, there's a high demand for their vehicles as it is. So moving along with that, it shouldn't be as high of a cost as a region that's, say, moving into the U.S., but I agree there are costs that are there, but after weighing the risks,
the risk outweigh the risk outweigh the costs, definitely.
And we're also part
to do a joint venture versus wholly owned subsidiary, it's definitely the better avenue for us. If we compare the risk of doing business through a joint venture or an alternative route versus on our own and acquiring a little more on the cost segment, then it's definitely worth it. So.
Okay, we're going to have to end there.
Okay.
Thank you very much.